Great day. I mean, it's quite a tough act to follow. There's been some really, really interesting speakers today. It's been really great to get some true global perspective on what's going on in the world of real estate. So just to give you a bit of background on me, there I am. So yes, I'm International Director at McGregor Boyle. McGregor Boyle is a multidisciplinary recruitment and executive search business. So we actually recruit in real estate, but we also recruit in technology, marketing, and legal. Personally, for a number of years, thank you. I was originally, I'm English. For 10 years I worked in London in real estate recruitment, working with British Land, Great Portland Estates, Tesco, and a lot of the international construction consultancies. And then I actually moved to Singapore, and in Singapore, leading on from the last presentation, I did a lot of work in Southeast Asia with a business called Infraco, building a lot of infrastructure in places like the Philippines, in places like Cambodia, and I ran the construction and real estate practice for Korn Ferry in Singapore before moving to Hong Kong. And I'm now in Dubai, where I've been for 4 or 5 years now. And really my remit is actually Saudi Arabia. So I want to talk a little bit about Saudi today. I'm going to talk really in 3 parts. The first part of what I want to tell you about is actually the journey. So what Tony Blair was alluding to earlier. It's quite interesting because, as I say, I've only been immersed in this market for about 5 years, but obviously Tony Blair, 20, 30 plus years, he has seen so much change. And for me, in the 5-year period I've worked in this region, seen such a change in attitudes. My business is talent acquisition, so getting people 5 years ago to come to Saudi Arabia and work on projects in the desert was not easy. I think I'd sort of done the metrics, and I'd have to approach at least 50, 60 people before anyone would say, yeah, okay, I'll go to Saudi. And that's changed so much now. I mean, I think actually the advent of COVID helped. A lot of people lost their jobs in the private sector in their home countries. And when I tapped them on the shoulder and said, come to Saudi, of course the money was attractive. But I think the projects also were super attractive as well, as we're now seeing finally. But COVID really accelerated that. And with more talent coming into the kingdom from the West and from the East, it becomes a much more well-trodden path. So now, as we stand today, I don't have so much issues trying to get people to relocate to Saudi. In fact, quite the opposite. I have armies of people saying, James, I want to go to Saudi, get me there. Yes, the money is a motivator, of course. They pay well and there's no tax. But actually more than that, and more exciting than that, is the projects. People are really, really now seeing what's being built. There's piling's been done in various projects. There's so much going on at Alula, where there's already natural ancient relics there. So my point I'm trying to make is the rate of change is huge, and Saudi is now becoming a much well-beaten trodden path for expats. People in the UK are saying to me, my ex-colleagues in recruitment are saying, we used to see half-wits going to the Middle East. Now they're taking all the best talent. Apparently it used to be all the people that weren't so great 15, 20 years ago, but now we're really taking the premium talent, and that's predominantly in Saudi. And so the word of mouth has been powerful, but I think the Vision 2030 has been stuck to extremely well. And so these projects are coming to fruition. And I think, AI and productivity is going to play a huge part in getting these projects finalized, because, I'm going to get to that in a minute. The second part I really want to talk about is, how we can retain talent. So, hang on here, I'm a bit behind. How we can retain the talent, because we've spent a lot of calories on bringing the world's best talent to Saudi. And to be frank, there's quite a lot of churn here. People will leave. after 12 months, after 18 months. It's actually a double-edged sword because it's both the Saudi locals are getting approached for so many different things. There is so much going on, but it's also the expats as well. You know, the culture hasn't been great for some people. Some people aren't enjoying, you know, the way that things are done here, but changing again so fast. I do think, if I put my hand on my heart, the HR mechanisms in this part of the world perhaps aren't as great as they could be. So what would I say in terms of retention of staff? Definitely there's old school things. LTIPs and traditional bonus retentions are important to keep your people on board. Inclusive workplace culture. So I actually spent some time last week with the global head of talent from BP in London. And we were talking about churn rates. And he was telling me, in fact, that their attrition rate is very low. Their attrition rate is below 4%. And if you look at some of the giga projects, and if you look at some of the other projects around the world, you know, attrition rates are north of 20%. So I asked the global head of talent at BP, you know, how are you keeping these attrition rates down? He talked about some of these things. Inclusive workplace culture was actually very important on his itinerary. You know, they have groups of ethnicities on a global basis. They have work from home initiatives, which again, here in the kingdom, they are starting to adapt to, and obviously with COVID was a huge accelerator in things like that. But then BP, for example, talked about charity work. You know, they will match charity donations £1 per £1. They will give you time off for volunteering days. The community groups I mentioned, there's also another thing which they do, which they get the 100 best leaders in the business, and the powers that be will choose the 40 people that the business simply cannot lose, and they will lock them in financially to make sure that those guys cannot leave for at least 3 to 4 years. But lastly, he talked about the AI wellness bot, which was quite interesting and is a nice segue into kind of my last slide, which is around AI and the future of work. So what BP have done recently is they have totally integrated AI, or they've recently permitted for AI to be embedded on all of their platforms, including this AI bot. But what that means is, you know, everyone at BP is now going through training to use this AI. The AI bot is actually reasonably rudimentary, if you ask me. It's a little bot that pops up on your screen and says, have you drunk enough water today? Have you done your steps? Have you taken your medicine? And obviously it's tailored to every employee. But I think it will be, you know, a little mascot basically that sits there and makes sure that your wellness, it might even go into talking about, you know, what charity work you've done if that's what you're into. But as I said, it leads me into the next slide, which is the impact of AI on the future workforce. So look, everyone's got their own take on ChatGPT. We know now, I spent some time last week speaking to the Chief Commercial Officer of Faculty, which is an AI business, which, funnily enough, he met Tony Blair 3 weeks beforehand. And I was speaking to John Gibson, the CCO, and he said to me really that, you know, the future of the workplace is so that every single employee now will be looked at as a team. Every single employee has access to ChatGPT and therefore its own copywriter, frankly, its own paralegal. Google is about to bring out a product called Gemini. I don't know if any of you have heard about Gemini, but it is another AI intuitive executive assistant. And this executive assistant will be able to do things that your human executive assistant will take days to do. So you can ask this executive assistant to find the last 7 years worth of emails between you and a certain client and bring out all the salient points from that, or find out how many times I've invoiced a certain client in the last 10 years, and put it all together in an email and present it to my CEO as to why we need to do more or less with this client. So the onus is really on productivity, from what I can see. And I asked the BP global head of talent, what do you think it's going to do to your workforce? Because a lot of people are frightened about AI and are they going to lose their jobs? Well, he said to me, our chief data officer has told me it's going to 10x our productivity. So we have a choice. We could either cut 90% of our staff, keep 10% and keep the same productivity, or we can have 10 times our productivity with the same workforce. What do you think we're going to do? So, as I say, it's all about productivity. It means that, when it comes to the world of things like quantity surveying or project management and doing project plans, it's just going to save so much time. So yeah, I think in conclusion, from what as I say, I've spoken to a number of leaders. No one really knows what's going to happen, frankly, but what we do know is we've got to embrace it. We've got to embrace this AI tech. It's going to mean that some of these projects, like let's look at NEOM, for example. To be honest, I think when the rest of the world saw the plans for NEOM, they thought, is this really going to happen? Well, I think, everybody now knows that it's absolutely going to happen, and it's happening, and it's not going to stop. But I think, really AI is going to implement a lot of these start dates a lot sooner than we thought they were going to be. Because the productivity is just going to go up and up and up, and we couldn't have seen that 5 years ago, frankly. So I would say in my conclusion that AI is going to play a dual role for white collars. It's potentially a threat to some roles, absolutely. I mean, I actually spoke at an event a month ago with marketing and communications people, and some of those guys are really scared, certainly the copywriters, that they're going to be redundant. So, yeah, it potentially poses an adversary, but it also presents the prospect of developing into a mutually beneficial and productivity enhancing partnership. So I think there's a lot of exciting things coming. Look out for this Google product, Gemini, if you haven't heard of it. It sounds super exciting. Yeah, and any questions, please drop me a line on LinkedIn or see me afterwards. Would love to speak to you.